Good evening. You're listening to the Xtreme Movie Show. I'm your host, Rob. Tonight's episode, Xtreme TV Season 2, Episode 11, Twin Peaks, that wonderful ABC TV show we've been covering on a weekly basis. I'm here joined by Professor Peaks, as it were. Professor, I have to sit there and say, we talked a lot last week about how that Episode 10 was the episode that really was the pivot episode for what the season would turn out to be, where ABC pretty much forced Mark Frost and David Lynch's hand at identifying the killer of Laura Palmer, and in doing so basically went totally against what David Lynch wanted to do, and in doing so the ratings took a dump. It never got renewed for a season after this, and it's unfortunate because it's one of the highest rated TV shows of all time, especially in 1990 when it first aired and going into season 2. It's been fantastic. It's been great. It was very jarring, I would have to say, about last week, knowing that that was going on, and as a first watch for you too, I would suggest to you that this is when things will start to get a little weird. We see some new characters in this episode, but we definitely get to see a lot more of the mythology, I think, of Twin Peaks fleshed out. So actually, this episode's a little bit better than last week. I think that's the only one you and I did not care about. But overall, once I got over that and continued to decide to watch it, I went, okay, at least I am understanding what they're trying to establish doing here for the remainder of the season, and what would be the remainder of Twin Peaks until more recently Lynch's return to Twin Peaks Season 3. Let me ask you, Professor Peaks, what's your initial impressions of this episode?
It is definitely better than last week's episode. It does introduce some new characters, and it's less about the characters that I'm interested in and more about where Dale is going from here. Because where we left off last week, we saw the Major, a flash of light, and that was it. And we wished we were caring a little more, I guess I could say. But we finally get to address that. But I didn't expect it quite as we did. This episode actually doesn't start off with Dale. It starts out with James, who is missing the entirety of episode 10. And he's just driving down the road until we see the sheriff's police department, where they're talking about the Major's being missing with his wife. And his wife is actually acting very, this is usual. Were you in the woods? That's significant. And you could tell that she is definitely used to his strange antics, I suppose you could say.
I thought Betty Briggs's description was done well, in that she's basically like, well, that's classified, but I have notes if you can say it. And to your point, what you get from her is not necessarily a dramatic concern like he's going on a binge and probably going to kill himself. Nothing like that at all. It's just that, yes, this has happened before. It is significant. There's a lot going with it. But the main point is that it's introducing what we kind of mentioned briefly in a couple episodes way back when about how there seems to be this spiritual element to Twin Peaks, specifically the woods. And we do find out about some of that here in this episode. And I think it's pretty telling that here, while she's discussing it, that Cooper basically, in his very interesting way of discussing things, seems to understand what she's saying specifically. And so I like this, because as Cooper, as we've seen, he's been basically a part of the FBI for a major part of his adult life that we know of, with a few hints to some bad things happening in the background, and of course some things to come later in this episode. But he seems to totally understand on a spiritual level a connection exists between Twin Peaks, the Major Briggs, and of course perhaps himself, maybe the killer Bob, because as of right now, since Laura's death and the identity of the spirit Bob inhabiting Laura's father, there's really been no discussion of it. It's like, okay, it's just a soap opera. So in a way, like I say, this episode is a little bit jarring. It seemed to kind of start off, okay, I don't understand the whole point starting off with James other than he's coming back in town, which, okay, we'll see about that later. But I thought the lady who showed up as wife, the actress for Betty, did a really good job here too. And it's sometimes Twin Peaks, despite all its kookiness, when it's just the detective part to it, it really seems like it's a notch above some of the other silly stuff there too. That's what I took out of this scene.
Yeah, no. I'm not saying she was acting in some way that was that would be seen as ridiculous. She was just saying that this is her husband, and that's what he does, but I can't answer all of your questions right now.
Yeah.
But that's sadly not the only part of this scene. Deputy Dumbass comes in, Andy, because they have a gift for Dougie's wedding. This is like his I think somebody makes a comment later on saying that he gets married every 2 months or something like that. So I guess he's just marrying left and right. But Gordon calls. That's the truly interesting conversation. And I think that's, that's in fact showing a better relationship between David Lynch and the show than I thought. Yeah, I wanted to make sure that was actually him on the phone, not just somebody trying to do his voice. And
Right.
Sure enough, it was.
Mm-hmm.
Saying how Gordon calls to say that they're sending down their top dog, Dennis Bryson, and that Cooper shouldn't get shaken. Everybody's used to getting their socks thrown around in their drawers a little while. And a smile should be his umbrella.
Well, what I liked about this exchange here too is we saw that the lead guy, Roger, he's a very soft-spoken but very powerful delivery type of actor. He's been in one or two small things there in the 80s, thought I recall. So I went, oh, this guy leads some heaviness into the role, which I think is good because, hey, Cooper did do stuff that probably is not right, and he does need to suffer the consequences of his actions. So what was interesting about here is because of all that, and him basically saying, hey, here's what's going on, we see Cooper kind of basically have what I'm going to call ascension, to use a slightly religious term here. You know, we're talking about powerful forces in the woods, and Major Garland Briggs being somehow a part of it, perhaps, and he feels he himself is as well. Cooper does. But to me, when he explains to him that, he kind of talks all mumbo jumbo-y, and he's like, what the hell are you talking about? He's like, I'm good. I think it's pretty neat. But I liked how this scene kind of extended out a little bit to the next part rather than bouncing around too. It gave us, I think, a nice solid base of Cooper to wrap our emotions around, especially how jarring the last episode is too. And so it kind of, I think it's a good start to this episode here.
Whenever Dale is going on about, he's on to a bigger game now, one of the spirit and mind, almost like the Twilight Zone entrance. Roger's staring at him and asking, what the hell are you talking about?
Yeah.
It's hilarious.
Well, we don't know, and we're, like I say, it gives us a place to put our feet into and feel a little bit of solid earth, because, like I say, how this huge shift in the Twin Peaks has been, because basically 10 episodes plus the original 8 halfway through this, a little more than that, and it totally goes off the rail. And the detective part of this, Mark Frost was heavily influenced, and I believe he was the writer for Hill Street Blues, so he knows how to piece all this stuff together. Maybe that's why it seems like it's got a bit more meat and potatoes to it, some of other goofy stuff. But at least there's some development with some characters, like in this next scene where you see the high school, which we have not hardly seen at all. You see Nadine had been somehow, thanks to Professor Jacoby, or Dr. Jacoby, being back, even though we only saw him briefly, basically helping convince the people in power to let Nadine back. And Nadine goes in there, she's talking to Donna, and she's like, I just need to ask your permission, because, girl to girl here, I'm kind of hot for this guy, Mike. He's got the cutest butt. And it's, what I liked about this scene was, okay, if you're gonna be absurd, at least have some style with it. And Nadine's character, as much as we start talking about it in the first episode or two, not liking her, it was kind of interesting, the supernatural strength she would have. Now she's permanently kind of in the state, and we don't know how this is going to handle. So yes, it's absurd. Yes, it's dumb. Yes, it doesn't make sense at all. But it gives her something to do. It reintroduces Mike, who actually, as we know, is Bobby's right-hand man as far as being one of the drug dealers, which is what started all the way back in the first few episodes in season 1. So I don't know if that means they're continuing to do drugs, because we do get a drug angle later in this episode that gets discussed but not really fleshed out. It just tells us, okay, Nadine's going to be a character we're going to have to watch here probably for the rest of the season.
Yeah, honestly, whenever this was happening and she was explaining her crush on Mike, in my notes I actually wrote lock her up because she needs sent to a loony bin. I can't. This is it's getting to a point of ridiculousness that I just can't take. But she's sticking around, and later on when we see her again, we'll see why. But we go from there back to James. The music's still playing as he's riding, but he parks at a bar called Hideout Wally's. He goes inside, sits at the bar, and there's this woman there.
Femme fatale, the blonde from the 40s than anybody would ever imagine if they're classic film fans. Absolutely.
That's right. So he gets a drink, and she's flirting with him a bit, and explains that her husband's Jaguar needs fixing. She took it and it got a little bit of trouble, but she asks James, would he be willing to come and fix it up? And he says that he let him hit the box first. And so he goes over to the jukebox, plays some music, and as he's just leaning his head against the window, looking at the discs inside, the lady's watching him. So we're introduced to a new character. What was her name? Mrs.
Evelyn Marsh.
Mrs. Marsh, yes.
New character, apparently.
Yes. One of a few.
She's a complete sex pot. I mean, that's.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's not. I mean, it's obvious that's what it's for. So.
Oh
okay.
Yeah, you can definitely tell where they're going with this. And I was actually interested in something involving James for once, so that was nice. But sadly,
go ahead.
Sadly, it doesn't last long because we go from there to the
Deputy Dumbass.
That's right. Go ahead and say what you're going to say about.
No, I was going to sit there and say between James pulling all this tail, showing us how it's done, not even trying. I have to give the man his props. And like I said, relative compared to other things, sometimes our opinions seem to pivot, and this is the next scene's a perfect example because this is where you get Deputy Dumbass. He's in there. And of course we get the whole Lucy love triangle thing between him and Richard. Richard basically said, hey, I'm like volunteer parenting for this kid to show Lucy how good I am. So they're basically having this passive aggressive one-upmanship as far as being a male role model. And they have this little kid in there and, Richard screws something up or whatever because they were supposed to go get a malt. And so then Deputy Dumbass is like, well, I'll take you there, little fella. And like, you look at the kid, he's the male version of what Donald looks like. It's kind of weird to explain. The guy's got this weird look on his face. He seems like a little pathetic little boy that you almost feel sorry for, but you don't because, of course, the shenanigans are going to ensue here shortly. And so all of a sudden, relatively, anything with James in it is going to be better than almost any of the other angles.
Yeah, sadly, with this,
I'm just saying it just is. I'm spitting truth here, and we know that because of the rest of this episode. So Lucy's not there because she's helping out with this wedding of one of the older gentlemen in town over at the
Dougie's.
Yeah. So that's why we don't at least see her. At least that's the excuse for this episode here. But then the next scene is more of a serious scene. It involves Cooper. So we're going back to where he's in a room and he's asking Truman, he's asking Hawk about the White Lodge. And they both kind of look at each other, and by them, of course, I mean Hawk and Harry, because this has not really been brought up. But then, Hawk, who would occasionally mention something spiritual about the woods and everything like that, says that there's other worlds and this is a part of it. But basically, the White Lodge is the good lodge, Black Lodge, bad, if we're going to use simple terms here. But he says it in a very Native American, ethnically seductive way. And Harry's basically said, yeah, this is it's a thing that's gone on for a really long time. An old town not legend, but just sort of thing that kind of goes with it. So we know obviously that's got something to do with the woods of Garland. We just don't know what, but it's amazing how this is Cooper's time to really start asking. And one of the things too that threw me off about the scene is that we talked about how every episode was basically one day, except for a few episodes ago we had like a 3-day jump because we were told that with the wake and everything too, and that's when everything seems to change here because you forget it's been less than a month since Laura had been killed. So anyway, what was interesting about the scene is not this information that probably will become a big deal later on here in Twin Peaks. It's the fact that Mr. Bryson arrives and insists on being called by his new name, Denise, because Denise, don't call me Dennis Bryson, the person that's going there to be investigating Cooper, has a history with Cooper, has worked with Cooper before, as we're about to find out. But we find out that it is one of the very first times you see David Duchovny, for the X-Files fame, Californication, and some other things too, Evolution. He's playing this person who is a cross-dresser in full female garb. And I got to say, when I saw this, I went, oh yeah, I totally forgot about this. Duchovny must have either hated or loved playing this role because it does it with such a very non-intense thing about it. I went, wow, he really went understated in it. It is pretty wild. And so for you, this must have been shocking for you, not knowing it. What was it like seeing this?
It was a little mind-boggling. when he walks in and he's like, oh, I go by Denise now. I felt bad, but I just I couldn't help laughing. It was just that was so out of left field. I didn't expect it. Gordon could have given a little warning.
Well, it's another introduction to an absurd thing for us to get us off guard, is the way I look at it. And I certainly have no issues with it at all. Certainly, this is what I remember Duchovny from before X-Files. I told you I was a very big Millennium fan. It was a more serious take on what the X-Files should have been, in my opinion. As a matter of fact, the X-Files guy, Chris Carter, left to go do Millennium after a couple of seasons. Had Lance Henriksen in it. And I remember starting to watch the X-Files after Millennium going, yeah, I like the X-Files. It's cute. It's neat. I like Duchovny. I like the whole thing to it. But it was lighthearted fare to me. It was bubblegum compared to the darkness that Millennium had into it. And I thought Millennium was that show that Twin Peaks kind of was at times, where it was really dark and everything. But of course now it's not. But part of me also goes, man, if people knew that Duchovny went into a sex clinic for rehab and took him a couple months to get out of there, and that's what broke up his marriage to Tia Leone, I mean, maybe this role's got him all confused or something. I don't know. But really, we're not poking fun at people that are cross-dressers or transgenders and any of those things. It's just simply for the time for this to actually come out, that was kind of a big deal on regular television, even in a night slot that Twin Peaks was too. So we'll get to see more of Denise later in this episode.
One of the things I want to go over with the scene before is exactly what Hawk goes into. I know you said the details will come up later, but when he starts explaining about the shadow self, the dweller on the threshold, you can tell that this is definitely going to have a weight later on in the show, because right now we're still kind of scrambling. This is better, definitely better than the last episode.
Yep.
But it's still kind of scrambling to find its place. And you can tell that this is the direction we're supposed to be heading, to this Black Lodge, where a shadow self of, I'm supposing Dale will be the dweller on the threshold. And if Dale goes without courage, well, his soul will be destroyed. But we go back to Nadine. After meeting Denise, we are in the school. We see Nadine. She sees Mike lifting weights. And so she goes ahead and she goes to the one right next to him and puts it at a ridiculous setting and just instantly with ease, just up and down, up and down. And Mike is like, what the hell do you want? And Nadine is saying, "Oh, being a little forward, aren't we?"
That's kind of funny. She was kind of funny. I admit I kind of laughed.
Yeah, but that's when the coach comes in and sees what she's benching and asks if she's interested in the wrestling team.
Well, it's a real small gym. Even by those standards, that's not a very good gym. But it's a big Smith machine and a few other things, maybe a few free weights. But even the guy squatting back there, he's half repping at best too, because all these people just don't do a full squat. There's nobody's like a Tom Platz or anything back in the day. And I only bring this up because the 80s was the golden age of bodybuilding, the 70s to the 80s, and going to a strength gym myself and all that at my somewhat advanced age, I can tell you that it was funny watching all these guys here in the background going, are they really doing all the exercises? Nope, those are all fake weights. They're really light. They're whatever. We're not supposed to see all that. And it's got the 80s kind of thing where everybody's wearing sweats and too much clothing that you wouldn't see now in these days. But Nadine's, she's got Mike in her radar, and you feel like she's just going to basically take him and abuse him. I mean, she's just got this glee look on her.
Yeah.
It's supposed to, I guess, be funny, and it is kind of funny, even though Donna had earlier said, well, hey, what about Ed? She's like, well, one's at school and one's at home. I like to go out, and he likes to stay home. So you're like, okay, this is just a situation where the roles are getting reversed. Here in the Pine Hills Palace, just west of Orlando, Florida, I don't know if you can hear that in the background, but we're starting to have some massive lightning. So if this cancels out, you will know why, FYI. Unfortunately, we get to probably the worst scene next. And that's Truman and Josie just getting done, getting busy, going over stuff. And he's like, hey, I can't be with you if I don't know the truth. So we get this big exposition dump of her basically saying, yeah, when I was a child, I was sold, into sexual favors. I was taken off by my master, and he taught me about the ways of the world and business and blah, blah, blah. And we get all this stuff. And you know what? I don't care. I just don't give a damn. I really don't. I don't mind Truman. I like him, but part of me goes, you're an idiot for being with her. I understand why he's with her, but why he didn't see this earlier, I just don't get it. Because while she's an exotic figure, I don't know if it's just her whatever. She should be a heel. She should be evil. And even though she was plotting and scheming, we figured that out pretty quickly. It just come across as she's supposed to be this, woman that has had a lifetime full of misery and decisions being made for her, and she doesn't know what to do. But like I told you, once a whore, always a whore, because there's a better scene with her in later on with Catherine Martell. What's your take on her situation and where this is going?
Yeah, I should have taken over explaining this scene, because now I have to explain the next scene, and it's but it doesn't matter. No, I don't agree with you completely on on Josie's situation. She seems like she's being honest finally with Truman, and
but she's always lied to Truman, and we know that already, right?
Well, she has always lied to Truman before. But she thought she was doing it to, protect.
To not hurt his feelings. Him. The only good thing was ever in my life. I want to puke already. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
But I'm glad that we finally have some answers as to what the hell was going on with her, and whenever Lee was there. But we go from there to Norma. She delivers a piece of pie to Roger, actually, and he says that he's heard good things, but it doesn't last long, because we go over to Hank, who returns with Ernie after their quote-unquote hunting trip. Norma actually goes over after Hank goes in the back to get him some coffee. And asks if he caught anything, and he actually says, "I hope not." And that was hilarious.
Yeah, exactly. A little STD reference there. Yeah. Some people probably took that. I will tell you this. This episode aired in December of 1990. I believe it was in October of 1990 that Magic Johnson, who was considered one of the greatest point guards of all time with the Los Angeles Lakers, came out publicly in the NBA about having AIDS, and his explanation was, and I'm being serious when I say this, that he tried to accommodate as many young women as possible. Lakers had won like 4 or 5 championships. Them and the Celtics basically made the NBA survive. Nobody watched it in the 70s. It was on tape delay. Larry Bird came in. Everything was great. You had a guy named Michael Jordan who was starting to get popular around now, but he still had to go through the Pistons as well as the Celtics and didn't have a chance to go through the Lakers. And so some people took this as a veiled insinuation about AIDS. And I'll only simply sit there and say anything currently at the time of this recording that Dr. Anthony Fauci may be putting himself out on a limb to defend when it comes to the current COVID-19 crisis here in the United States and around the world. He was also the one involved in AIDS. So some people go back and see a lot of striking parallels between the way COVID happened and the way AIDS happened. I'm only mentioning this just because of the synchronicity of the timing of what's going on. But him saying that, hey, I hope you didn't catch anything. Yeah, a lot of people back then talked about it as more of a, an AIDS kind of thing. I'm not saying that's how it's meant to be. I just took it as, we saw them fooling around at the One-Eyed Jacks, right? So of course we think it's like, an STD or something, but really it just was something that for its time, I just felt needed to get mentioned too, because that was a big deal for a lot of people back then. The whole AIDS thing, this went on for quite some time in the 80s. So anyway, not to make it sound too dark.
No. Yeah, going on a little bit of history with Rob is never something to complain about. But getting back to the scene, he then makes up, oh, yeah, I caught this big moose, and it's being stuffed right now as we speak. But Norma, he asks where Vivian, I think her name is, Norma's mom is, and she says that she's gone. She went home, and you should go too. And then she walks away, and Hank learns that that Norma's mom is gone, and actually tells Ernie, "That's good. It'll help with what you have to do. So don't get distracted and get your shit together." Is basically what Hank tells Ernie. But then we get to Nikki, Dickie, and Andy.
Nikki, the little kitty.
That's right. He gets
prick.
He gets his malted with a lot of whipped cream up top, and you can tell that Dick is just tired of it.
Norma hooked him up. I gotta say, she did a good job.
Then Nikki gets whipped cream all over Dick, and he is absolutely pissed off. And Andy's like, "Oh, well, I'm sure Uncle Dick isn't too, man. Are you, Dick?" And Dick's like, "What are you talking about? I'm livid." And so Andy stands up to grab some napkins. Nikki turns and spins his seat around because they're sitting at the bar. So it's like spinning, and Andy goes to sit, and it twirls him to the ground, and Dick is then just laughing at Andy and saying, "Oh, well, Nikki, I'm sure Andy isn't too upset," or something along those lines. I just have to say, I don't care how fast Nikki was spinning that chair. When Andy sat down, it wasn't going to spin him that to the floor like that.
It's this kid. He looks like what everybody would look like in the 90s. I mean, it's 1990 technically, but the whole death of rock and roll and heavy metal and just fantastic music from the 80s is very close to turning over into the whole 90s genre stuff. And here he's got a little bit of the flannel look going on. He's got the really punchable face with the haircut that he shouldn't have. And I just, you don't necessarily want to wish violence on a child, but you would totally understand that these guys are trying to do whatever. And here's the thing. They must have been raised by Benjamin Spock because they're so permissive. They let the kid get away with this stuff. They don't admonish them at all. And it really is the cute thing with each other where they're trying to indirectly needle each other. And they don't even dare to tell this kid, "Hey, you did something wrong." this isn't going to end well at all. It just isn't. So in a way, I go, I almost can't blame Lucy for playing these two schlubs against each other, and she feels like these are the only two available schlubs all in Twin Peaks. So I'll go ahead and have relations with both of them and see what I can, get out of here. I mean, geez, it's frustrating to watch this because it's filler. It really is, and it's not fun filler. This is painful. This is more painful than anything James. This is more painful than James's little music song that he sang with the two ladies and they recorded. The one that brought blood to the tears of my eyes. It's this was not a fun scene at all. Anyway.
I have to. That's a really hard thing to compare it to, but it really is hard watching. It makes me regret any time I see Andy's face. At least with Dick, he reminds me of Leland, just in his entire way of just his expressions, things like that. So he's a little more fun to watch, but Andy is just like, it's like that horse with the broken leg. You don't just leave it there.
I know.
Put it out of its misery.
Oh. Speaking of James, he appears in the next scene where the femme fatale is standing next to him while he's investigating the underpinnings of the car and decides, yes, it's a beautiful car and I think I can fix it for you. And she's like, okay, room and board, as long as you need to. Thanks, and walks off. And of course, we know that femme fatales are up to no good, and so that's fine, but you at least got to sleep with them. And she's basically throwing herself at him, and he's just acting like a dumb idiot. So okay, that's fine. They're going to drag this out. We don't know what's going on, but you can't trust her. I mean, we know that. He just said, I want payment up front before I fix this car, if you know what I'm saying. But he's such a he doesn't have to, though, because he pulls all these women. But basically, yeah, her husband, who's not mentioned, likes to collect old pretty things, whatever. And, it's just, he gives some sort of weirdo biker hippie thing about his bike. And, well, it's not how my bike looks, it's where it takes me that counts, sort of stuff. And you're like, shut up. So even though James is better than some other stuff there, that's only by default because everything else is so bad. But, he tries to act, he does the deep inhale sigh and all that, and she just walks off going, ha, 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 whatever I'm plotting and scheming is just advanced, to the second level, I guess.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning, she says room and board and anything else.
Of course. Of course. Okay, it's of course. What's interesting, though, is the next scene, because you get an extended scene of some history of Twin Peaks where you see some old footage of the Great Northern Hotel and the groundbreaking, the people that are involved with it. And this goes on for like a minute or so. And it's neat because you kind of forget that there is a history of this town. And sometimes, when they show certain things like this, you go, okay, this kind of works a little bit, I think. And for me, the only disappointing thing was the fact that we talked about how Ben was the smart man about town. He was the real plot and schemer out of everybody. Maybe not necessarily a killer, but he had his hand involved in stuff as the town capitalist, let's say, because a lot of people like to equate that term with somebody who's doing evil things. He's just having a bit of a crisis right now, and he's having a tough time of things. But he's even having a tougher time because Hank walks in and Ben reminds him, hey, I've had a pretty shitty few days here with all these things going on. And Hank basically says, well, you know what? It's going to be worse because you don't own One-Eyed Jacks, and Hank says he doesn't work for him either. And we don't know what the hell Ben's going to end up doing, because this is disappointing seeing Ben. Even though he may be a bad guy, you may not like him, he's at least competent, and seeing somebody competent, what they do is usually entertaining, or you have respect for him. Here, he's just kind of mumbling about himself. He's making those stupid little puppet shadow thingies or whatever and all that, because he's kind of losing it here a little bit. And the Ben I know, the Ben I want to see on screen, is somebody, not in the depths of despair. I want to see him plotting, scheming how he's going to take everybody out, because basically Hank, the hired muscle here, is playing everybody by his sides. He's a stooge. He's going to eventually get his, and should. But I'm a little disappointed in Ben here. I understand he's got to suffer before he's able to possibly climb that mountain of his back again, but I don't know if we're going to see that. What did you think about this scene?
I have to agree. First thing I wrote, Ben's a mess. He's absolutely a mess. And that's all that Hank calls him. You're a mess. Look what's, you screwed up and you're out. And actually, whenever he says, Ben, you're out. And Ben starts mocking him and starts cackling. You can tell he's just gone. He's gone off the deep end.
Well, before we go on to the next thing, I want to bring this up here because I think it's an important point that you said here too. I had really went off, and we had a major disagreement an episode or two ago about the writing choices that were going to happen here with these episodes 7, 8, 9. Basically, I call it, those pivots, and that's the fact that we're used to seeing Ben being mentally engaged and stimulated by being challenged intellectually at plotting and scheming. And so even though he's been taken advantage of here, and now he's out of jail and everything else there too, I would have expected to see him go, I'm going to take that to the next level. Okay, you caught me relaxing here a little bit. You knocked me down for the standing 8 count, but I'm ready. I'm taking you seriously now. We're not getting that, Ben. And that's where I said I didn't like how some of the writing seemed to totally change what we knew about some of the characters. And I think I'd went off too about Pete, which we'll talk about here shortly, and his involvement with Catherine, because that's going to be a big thing here coming up. But at least the other things up to this point that we've seen seem to be consistent with what's going on and who they are as a character. It's just that I was disappointed with Ben and Pete to some extent. But, that does take us to the next scene here. And I kind of want to like this scene more than it is, but it feels a little out of place to me. And it's where we've got Cooper in his room, and he gets a cassette tape from Wyndham Earle, his old partner, who says a lot of stuff in a lot of 50-cent words instead of 5-cent words to sound serious. And of course, they're playing the old chess by mail sort of thing or whatever. And it's just more philosophical mumbo jumbo about what's happening with pawns being forfeited and the king must die and all sorts of phrases that nobody even knows what chess is anymore anyway these days for the most part, because if they did, they'd know that a knight on the rim is grim and pawns are the soul of chess. But that being said, I like the scene, but it just didn't seem like it fit. I guess they just threw it in here because they wanted to mention Wyndham Earle, which will be something later on. How did you feel about it?
Yeah, the way he was talking like a 60s Batman villain from Adam West's Batman.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, right. I will sacrifice my queen because the king must die. That's exactly the vibe that I was getting from Wyndham Earle. And obviously, he was in a mental facility. So he definitely doesn't have everything screwed on right. But it really just hit that way. And but this is the first time we've heard from Wyndham Earle. We've seen letters and things, but this is the first time we actually hear his voice. But of course, we go from there quickly to the wedding that Lucy is supposedly helping with, but she's not seen at all. If you're going to say a character's gone for an episode, at least make up a good excuse. So they show the wedding, and it's to the ceremony, and the preacher's asking, does anyone object to this union? And Dwayne, Dougie's brother, stands up and instantly says that he objects because, she's just trying to marry him for the money and blah, blah, blah. And Harry actually has to stand up and says, come on, Dwayne, let's go. And
let me ask. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
And they leave the room. That's it. And the wedding goes on.
Well, okay, for this scene, this guy we saw introduced with his brother. This guy is Dougie. He's getting married to Lana, I think is her name. And his brother's Dwayne, and they're always fighting or whatever. Okay, yucks galore, whatever. They're different personalities because they're close brothers. We get it. I don't mind them there, and I don't mind them being older men. It adds some sort of credence to Twin Peaks and the fact that it's a very small town. People know everything. There's a lot of history being hinted at, especially in this episode. But let me ask you this, and I'm just asking as a first-time viewer, do you even know what Dougie does or who he is or what from up to this point?
No, I know. I forgot. I know Dwayne is the mayor, but right. Dougie, I've forgotten exactly what they said he does.
I don't recall off the top of my head if they said what they did already. They may have, because I remembered. Okay, one is a mayor, the other one I kind of didn't really get. A pharmacist, I think, is uh, whatever. I don't know, but I'm asking that because obviously they spent a lot of time on this. So I'm wondering if we're going to see these guys more. And so to me, it's like either by the function or a relationship, something as significant as a wedding means I should be paying attention to this guy, or at least have some sort of opinion about him, and I don't right now. So when I mentioned briefly a few minutes ago, I'm tying this back to putting this in the bucket of other things of questionable writing decisions as far as what's going on, because this guy's married some really young hot stuff. We don't know nothing about her. She's cute. She's not a heartbreaker. There was a scene where she's like, "Oh, your agent Cooper or whatever wants to talk." It seems like she wants to talk to Cooper, but it doesn't seem anything more than just, "Oh, hey, I heard about you," sort of thing. Nothing like, "Oh, I've got something I've got to tell you." So it's like, why are they spending so much time on a character and potentially his wife when they're not developing anything? Yeah, so that's why I'm asking if you know what he does, because off the top of my head I put question mark and went, okay, this is the guy's brother. Which one is the mayor? And so I'm like, yeah. Exactly. I mean, and yes, it's made, the comment's made many times that he marries a lot and he marries young. Okay, so what? I mean, what's the big deal? I don't know.
The only thing that I know, the actor for Dougie played a sculptor on the Golden Girls. That's how I know him, and that's it. Now I know nothing in this show. There's really nothing tying me to the character, and thus it was a stupid decision to have a character we were introduced last episode for maybe 8 minutes of their arguing, for them to all, okay, we're all going to go to this wedding, everybody. Yay. No, it's just...
I like them having a wedding. I do. It's just, I don't know. Just, I'm not saying it's not working. It's probably the weakest element of this episode to me. I mean, despite things we like or don't like, I just feel it's the weakest.
But you know what? A lot of scenes happen at this reception.
Yes. Yes.
Quite interesting. So Cooper is called by Denise to asking if he can come down. So he gets dressed, but before he goes, he makes a note to Diane to tell her about Denise.
Denise, don't call me Dennis.
And that's right. When Coop goes down to the wedding, we get to see Log Lady for a second mentioning, yes, I love a whatever their last name is, wedding. And but obviously she doesn't get a lot of time to shine because Denise is there and tells Cooper about how they found some coke residue in his car. And says that to help him, it's really a delicate area, but she then makes a comment about she's been trying to get more in touch with her feelings, and that actually was quite humorous.
You know, it's actually a very good scene because regardless of what you may feel about somebody cross-dressing and whether you feel it's unnatural or something must have happened and emotionally scarred somebody, or how could somebody in an official capacity do it? Maybe David Lynch is making fun of at the old FBI and J. Edgar Hoover being a cross-dresser. Who knows? That could be a part of this, and it could be just a rib, an internal one where the smart people know what's going on. I don't know. I don't care. But what's good about this in terms of being an episode is we're introduced to Denise. Okay, and it's by somebody we don't know as an actor because Duchovny was brand new at the time. Immediately, nothing is said when you meet Denise being dressed up as a lady and dressed up like a professional looking lady, not like a harlot or anything. And full makeup, lipstick, rouge, the whole 9 yards, not whorish, but very professional. And I'm going, okay, he's not being overly swishy or effeminate, but feminine enough. And what he describes here in just a couple sentences, I was undercover where the only person that would sell us drugs would sell it to a crossdresser. So I did that. My partner thought that, I did such a great job, and, but I just felt more comfortable doing it. So it's been a surprise to me how comfortable it makes me feel and how relaxed I am. And relaxed is the key word, I would say, how Duchovny plays this, because it's laid back, but it's not, surfs up. It's not, druggy laid back. It's an interesting development in a couple senses, with only a minute or two's worth of time for a character on television that immediately visually stands out, and doesn't stand out because, oh my God, so effing hot or ugly or disfigured or anything like that at all, just as far as a character goes. And that's one thing that I have to say is actually a bright spot about this episode, is Duchovny's character and or the way he played it. This was a bright spot, despite how weird it may seem, I think.
Absolutely. This episode introduces characters way better than the last episode,
Exactly.
which has characters that we were introduced to getting married today. But I digress. So whenever he's explaining about what happens, pretty soon after, that's when the wife asks Coop about, hey, wait, you solved the Laura Palmer case, right?
Right.
And it doesn't last long. It's a quick exchange, but he says that he's not FBI, not right now. And that's really something that hits, because that has been a major part of what we've known him as in this show, the entire time. That's been part of his identity. Log Lady quickly makes a comment about Cake, and Pete makes an appearance. Mm-hmm. But the scene ends with Dale dancing with Audrey, and I think that's it's partially a reflection of he's not FBI right now. I know he said, was it last episode, we can just be friends, but
there's no way on planet Earth a man can say let's just be friends to a woman. It just doesn't work like that ever. And that's what he did, because you're right. I was going to ask you, how did you feel seeing them dance and having a nice time?
Yeah, no, he's not Agent Cooper right now.
Right, but as far as a fan of the show watching it, how did this make you feel?
I mean, I think it kind of backtracks exactly what he said in the last episode. But to be fair, he did say that when he was supposed to be leaving Twin Peaks. It was before he said his goodbyes, before he was suspended. We also get to see Andy dancing with Denise, and he has this stupid look on his face.
I couldn't tell if Denise was grabbing his butt. I'm serious. I went back and looked at it again because he's got that look, and it looked like he was kind of like, and I'm like, okay, I Duchovny has that effect on men, I guess.
Maybe, I guess so. But then that's the end of the wedding. And do you want to take the lovely lady?
No,
bringing us the end here?
I don't. No? This just introduces this is the worst scene of the episode. The next one come up. Go ahead. The whole Josie thing. You go on ahead.
Wow, I thought you said that you.
Okay, I'll take it. I'm lying. Yeah, so we had talked about how Josie had been AWOL, and now we're trying to see where's her arc going to go. And to me, I had a tough time with this scene in that I really loved how Catherine performed. I said she was really good. She was the one that challenged Ben. She was the one that really is trying to do all this stuff. All of a sudden, they tried to complicate matters instead of simplifying them, which I think is a mistake, but it's necessary to give them an arc. Josie's basically throwing herself on her sword in front of Catherine, basically saying, hey, this is my backstory. This is what happened. I have nowhere to go to. I don't want to go back. Catherine's basically makes her bitch, says, you're going to work for me. I'm going to take breakfast at 7 a.m. If you don't, this is what's going to happen. Because they talk about her husband and they go through all the stuff about what was going on. And it's like, who cares? When will this end? We don't. We first saw her, somebody being manipulated maybe from afar, and the sheriff didn't know better, and it had this international flavor to it in a small town, which made it kind of exotic. Whether we find out she was plotting and scheming, and we're supposed to believe that she's innocent, despite the fact in this episode she was meant that she was raised in child slavery for adult relations, let's say. She even says, oh, you're in terrible danger, Catherine, and blah, 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 blah. And Catherine's like, you know what? I'm smarter than you. I don't want to hear you run your mouth. You're my bitch. Oh, by the way, go do it now. You may be dismissed. And I like Catherine kind of like taking the reins over Twin Peaks, because really her and Ben fighting, I think, is the strong thing. But this whole thing with Josie is just not doing it for me at all. And part of it too is, like I said, Truman and hers relationship. I understand it. It just doesn't look natural. It feels forced. Maybe it's their chemistry on screen. I don't know. Maybe it's because Joan Chen, who plays her, as exotic as she's looking, her default look is always, I'm going to look down to the corner of the room here with my head turned, and the character she's talking to is behind her while she says something there. It's like, I just did not like this scene at all. I mean, like I say, I like Catherine. I like the fact that she's back. She got me as Toji Murray. But it even gets more complicated because the dude comes out, and who's this guy? This is
Andrew, Josie's dead husband.
Yeah. It's like, are you effing kidding me? I like soap opera as much as the next one, really. But the person that we never saw, that we know she married basically to get his money, all of a sudden shows up out of the blue, scheming with Catherine about stuff. And I'm like, oh, that's what they're going to do. Okay. Now I know what time to take my pee break. That's all.
Yeah, it is annoying. I have to agree with that. I think that whoever wrote this episode really wanted an oh shit moment. And you're right, but that they did make that, but it's in this confusing way that doesn't make any sense. If Andrew's been alive this entire time, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just thinking back when Hank had business with Josie as well, and made it seem like her husband died in an accident. At least that's what we're led to believe. Does this mean that Hank is just terrible at his job? He can't finish a single thing. He messes up with Catherine. He messes up with Andrew. He's really just a failure on all fronts.
I mean, again, introducing a new character, and it's somebody that we don't know about or just know of tangentially, so we don't really care about him. So maybe this is the time to emotionally have the biggest impact with it, I guess. I don't know.
It seems like a mess
taste of
to
weak
me.
sauce. It did, yeah. Well, I mean, comparing, like we said, to episode 10, very jarring, basically like a relaunch to me, or a reset, or bailing out, if you will. This is when the ratings really started to tumble in season 2 for Twin Peaks, and it didn't help that ABC, like I say, pretty much forced their hand at having a killer for Laura Palmer, as well as moving around time slots, and other things were going on too. But as a writer, some things are going to work, some things aren't. All you can do is try to put yourself in a position maybe for them to be successful, I guess. But a better episode, a bit more entertaining one, a bit of a lighter episode. It really seems like the only Twin Peaks that we've come to know here in a season and a half is, hey, what's going on with this White Lodge, Black Lodge stuff with Cooper? And I felt a little sad when him and Audrey were dancing or whatever, and she's like, you're an excellent dancer, and nothing seems to happen of it. He doesn't say like, hey, let's get now I can go grab a cup of coffee with you, and leave on a cliffhanger like that. That'd get us talking for next week. It's just, we're going to have to just decide, I guess, what to be entertained by with what absurd angles are getting developed, whether it's Nadine in the high school, whether it's Denise, played by Duchovny. I just don't care about the Josie Packard thing. And James, as much as we give him crap, his situation's a little bit better, but you just know that you're not allowed to trust a femme fatale. So no matter what age you are, it's just too easy when things come to you that way, when women throw themselves at you. Enjoy it as you can, and we'll see what happens with that. So I don't know. I mean, I like the episode. It was better. but it's like, okay, I didn't have my arm fall off in a bad hunting accident or something like that. I'm just permanently paralyzed. I guess that's good news. That's kind of how I feel about it too. I'm injured, but it's not as severe as it seemed to be. What's your take on the episode?
Yeah, it's sadly just been a bit of a mess. I wanted to get its act together. Obviously, we're in episode 11 out of 20? So we have 9 episodes remaining. They need to, I don't know. They need to build upon what we've had before rather than just throwing new characters at us. While I'm interested in Denise through the entire introduction, she had a fantastic breakout episode.
Yeah.
I still feel like we need more of that connection with the characters that have already been established. Where I disagree is James's angle right now with him and Mrs. I'm going to have to remember that name, but basically Mrs. Robinson. He has an interesting angle for once. He's not being shown as while he was trying to get his deep biker moment, he is actually interesting us because we don't know what exactly is going on over there at that house. Mrs. Marsh, that's her name. So the Marsh household is of interest, and we want to see where that goes. And as for Josie and Catherine and now Andrew, I'm over it now. I had a little bit of interest in season 1 when we were going through it. Now I don't care. Okay, I just want it over with.
Yeah, and that's one of the things we've said about Twin Peaks is that what's challenging for any show is to introduce a lot of characters, and they've done it in a good way where we didn't get everybody in the first episode or the last episode, and it didn't necessarily feel forced. We got some here or there, and some characters like I even mentioned here, Dr. Jacoby. We saw him in an earlier episode this season. We haven't seen him since. Is he going to play any more of a part? Are some of these characters that were big in season 1 and part of season 2 going to show up or not? Or some going to go out? I do like how we don't necessarily know that. And I think at this time, it wasn't a given that Twin Peaks was going to be canceled. I may be wrong on that. But the feeling is watching this that it wasn't a sure thing yet, because the idea was that this is something Lynch thought of, that he could take this in several years worth of directions. And coming off of a show like Hill Street Blues and other 70s shows too, somebody like Mark Frost, along with David Lynch's ideas, they could easily come up with 3 to 5 seasons of television. And television back then was a good, say, 23 episodes roughly a season, not these 8 to 10 to 12, 13 limited engagement ones that most of your services do now, or even regular television for that matter. They knew how to flesh out stuff and how to add filler and have A, B, C, D level plots and stuff. And here we see where some are getting introduced. So it's not necessarily bad. It's just some of them aren't going to work. But overall, a strong episode, I think, because of Duchovny and his character, the White Lodge, Black Lodge stuff, which seems like it's going to be very prominent. Obviously, the very small thing about here that seems so far away is the whole original hook, and that's who killed Laura Palmer. So hopefully we'll find some more out about the White Lodge, Black Lodge next episode. Garland Briggs being AFK, and not bad. Digestible, I suppose.
Yeah, no, it absolutely was. And at least I can say that I was more interested this episode than I was last episode. And that is the highlight.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Episode 11, Season 2 of Twin Peaks, here on Xtreme TV. I'm your host, Rob, along with Professor Pixel, members of the Xtreme Movie Show, where we do movies, we do some television, we do mostly 80s stuff, some 90s, some current things. We dabble around with different things there. Check out stuff. Let us know what you want to do. Let us know your feedback on Twin Peaks as we're continuing our journey forward. Next week, we'll be doing episode 12. So, for Professor Pixel and everybody involved, have a damn fine cup of coffee, think of blackberry pie, and as always, thanks for listening. Good night.